see your mother. You were only given one. Go see your mother. And you know that you will never have another. Go see your mother. Go see your mom.
Okay.
Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia. This is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
And sweetheart, so you had a Freiche Pesach.
I did, but I actually wanted to talk about Pesach, but it's interesting. I had a great time. Really happy to be around everybody. But I realized that now that I have my own family, like I have a kid now, I have a wife, I wasn't able to spend as much time as I would like with my family, like my brothers and my sisters. And I was wondering, did you have that realization growing up as an adult that you're going to put into better words, but growing apart from your immediate family and then being with your main family, and how that process was developed and grown upon?
Oh gosh, that is
Right?
Quite a question.
While you're thinking, I could talk about it.
I lived apart from my family for about 4 years before I married. So yeah, Kat, we know you want to participate in the conversation. So the idea of growing apart after getting married, I mean, I was already pretty much my own person, and my older sister, she was married and had her own family, and my younger sister wasn't married yet. My younger sister married around, had to be like around 1982, something like that, 82, 83. So, because I remember attending the wedding with your two older sisters, and at that time, one of your second oldest sister was a baby. We were holding her, and your oldest sister was a toddler. So it's like there was never this feeling of growing apart. From also, the problem came up when I became frum that I couldn't really have a seder with my family because first of all, my level of kashrus was different from their level of kashrus. At that time, this is very interesting. At that time, there was actually, would you believe, as far as meat was concerned, you actually had a difference between kosher and glatt kosher. And I remember going to the store for the first time shortly after I was married, or maybe it might have been a little bit before I got married, in Baltimore, asking the butcher for glatt kosher. And he said, yeah, that they had it, but it was a little more, it was more expensive and they didn't have a lot of it. And it wasn't until I remember in the early, like late 70s, early 80s, when stores actually started to eliminate this whole difference, this whole separation of kosher and glatt kosher, and decided that they were only going to sell glatt. And it became a controversy because one of the arguments was that, wait a minute, there can't possibly be this much glatt. But it's like now you go into the kosher stores, all you see is glatt. You don't even see like stama kosher and then glatt. You don't see that anymore.
Well, it glatt kosher is an American thing. Not saying it's not in halacha, because it is based in halacha. It's just not until the lifestyle in America was able to catch up with glatt kosher being more mainstream, because there's no glatt kosher in Europe, as far as I know. No.
So what do European Jews do?
They do regular kosher, like you're talking about.
There's no galat in Europe?
It's very rare. It's
That
very
is
rare.
strange.
Yeah, I've mentioned it on the pod, and I mentioned it to you a couple of times
Mhm.
that basically, I remember I was in Italy, and we wanted to get some shawarma or something, some meat stuff. And we went to this meat place, and they heard us all talking in English with an American accent, and they said we don't do glot here. And they're like, okay, where can we get glot? And they're like, it's not here. We don't do glot here. And we realized, like, whoa, hold up. That Americans actually have this privilege of having glot kosher, where most places just don't have it outside of Israel and America.
So what do the Chabad Shluchim do? They just import the meat from Israel?
They could do that. They get meat from Argentina, I
Mhm.
believe. That's a thing. Um, some of them just do it themselves. You know what I mean? But I'd have to ask a shliach, what they do. But that's really how it goes, where it's not very common to have glot kosher
Hmm.
outside of America and Israel and a few other countries in the South America, I believe.
Wow, that's
Europe has because Europe has their own problems with it, but we're getting distracted. The main thing I want to talk about because
the family at Pesach.
well,
Yeah,
because
so anyway,
it's
so there was this, like I said, so I never really had this thing because like I said, becoming from an I remember though hearing the story about your father. I didn't realize these people were talking about your father at the time. I heard them. This is when I just become from that year, and I was having it was after Pesach, and I was at my Shabbos family, and they said they were talking about what happened with Zalman, and I didn't know they were referring to your father. They were talking about some guy named Zalman, and they said he had tried to have a regular Seder with his family. And, going through the regular, going through the Haggadah, doing everything the way it's supposed to be done, not just very, very quickly, Manish Tana answer, okay, let's eat now type thing, And evidently, his family was not happy. They wound up eating for very late, as most of us do, because a lot of times with the daylight savings, the Sidurim don't begin very often until like 9 o'clock, maybe 10 in some cases. And so by the time you finish, it's like around 12 o'clock, maybe 1 sometimes. Sometimes I remember being at some Sidurim that didn't finish until 2, even though you're supposed to eat the Afikomen by 12 or by 1. There were times that we just couldn't get to it until like after 1. Yeah. So so he didn't do that. If that, he never did it again. He made sure to go to a regular Seder with a regular from family, because he thought as a Baal Tshuva, he thought that he could do this for his family, and maybe he thought that their eyes would be opened up, maybe they would appreciate it, but evidently they did not.
It's interesting you said that about the Pesach Seder and about trying to convince your family, because I think that's the other thing I was going to get at when it comes to family,
Mhm.
where it's like you have this illusion that one day you'll have some miraculous deep connection or deep camaraderie with siblings and whatnot, and like you have it for a split second, and when you're like in your young adult stage, but then as you grow older and start having your own life, you kind of have this like drift apart, take a step back, and realizing that maybe you're important in their life, you're just not noticed, maybe.
I don't know, it's like you said, to put it more in sociological terms, once you get married and have your own family, that is your primary relationship. Your
Yes.
primary relationship switches from your parents and your family to your spouse and your new family now, and your kids, your family.
Correct.
That is
Correct.
the primary relationship now.
So now that you brought that up, did you have that experience of understanding, I guess, maybe like, okay, I'm about Shuva now, but like, there'll be moments where I'll spend time with my family, I'll be with my family, and then realizing that those moments that you had with your family are gone and never coming back?
Gone and never coming back. Let's put it this way. I don't think they were there to begin with, but okay.
I see your point. I see your point, and that's where I'm saying we're just like there's almost this illusion that you think that you don't have it now, but you'll get there someday.
I never felt that way.
Really?
I never felt that way. I was always, I was the black sheep of the family. Bah.
So you never really cared about your family or thinking they can be you can be close to anybody. You just kind of like lived your life and c'est la vie.
Pretty much. Although when I went to New York, I remember when I lived in New York, there were times that I was homesick, and wanted to be back with, especially, my nice, quiet, split level suburban house in a nice, quiet suburban community of Baltimore. And now I'm living in a basement apartment in congested Brooklyn, New York.
So what exactly were you homesick about then?
I guess the comfort of my the comfort and security of living, on my parents' house, versus, like I said, the this little basement apartment, especially New York, with the heating systems, antiquated heating systems in the middle of the winter being absolutely freezing. And my mother's house, my mother always kept the house at 70.
So was there any, I guess, maybe feelings, of wanting a connection with your sisters at some point and missing it?
In a way, I did, all by Juvas do this. They want to try to influence their families to be more firm, and they hope that their families will, that they hope that they can influence their families to be from like they are, and so that you can have a from house to go back to for Yontif, for Shabbos. And it comes to the point where you realize, hey, they're not going to change. And when it comes to Shabbos and Yontif, you can't be. There's a certain feeling, of of I guess loss or something, that you realize after a while, hey, I can never really be with my family for Shabbos and Yontif. I have to be in a frum environment. And sometimes that can be upsetting. I mean, I remember every now and then, I remember I would come in from New York and I hadn't seen my family in a while. And so I was very tired. And I thought, I'm going to stay with my family for Shabbos. I'll make my kiddush. I'll have my chal and everything. And I'll just sleep because I'm really tired. I just want to, I just want to sleep and just be by my, have just a quiet time. And I did that a couple times, but the problem, especially towards the end of Shabbos, you find yourself sitting alone in your house with all the lights off. It's like, this is not working.
But maybe was there anything?
I did it a couple times, and then I realized, I can't have Shabbos by them. I have to be from family for Shabbos.
Well, I understand the from kite and the needing to stay true to your principles. I understand that. What I was trying to get at, and what I was saying through the example of like having a strong emotional connection to your siblings and your parents, and realizing that as you get older, that emotional bond is no longer there.
Yeah, that's true, but it's not a matter of feeling badly about it. Do you remember in Charlotte's Web when Wilbur gets upset because Fern is now 12 years old. She's getting a little older. She's 12 years old. And the boy that she's been friendly with all those years, he's also like 12 or 13, whatever. And so now they're getting to be more like teenagers. And so he invites her to walk with him around the fair, and he'll buy her a soda and everything. So she leaves Wilbur and she goes with the boy now. And so Wilbur says to Charlotte, how about that? She just left me and went off with this guy. What do you think? How do you like that? And Charlotte says to him, I like it fine. And he's like, what do you mean you like it fine? And she explains, hey, this is life. People kids get older, kids grow up. And, eventually they bond with, it's a natural process of relating to the opposite sex and dating and eventually getting married. And she says, she said, this is fine that, Fern and this boy are obviously getting older. And the same thing, it's like, you get married, you have your own family, and you're not as close to you, but it's not that you don't have a feeling of leaving them. You have a feeling of going to something rather than leaving. I mean, hey, you're married with your own family now. Did you feel like a sense of loss when you realized you had flown the coop?
Yeah.
Really? You missed us?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's where that's why I brought this up in the first place. It was, and I said it in the beginning of this episode where I'm like, I was, enjoying everyone's, company Pesach time, and I was really happy to see everyone. But looking back at the time, I felt like I was more of a guest, a very special guest than, like, I guess you'd say a sibling maybe. But I'm trying to find a way to express it because I feel that I know my family loves me and I love them, and there's this connection that we have. But this Pesach made me feel almost disconnected, and the reason why I feel is because my family is there in a sense where, like, I have a toddler, I'm raising a child, and like I'm more involved, where like I wasn't necessarily having a lot of time to hang out with everybody, I guess, if it makes any sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And like, yes, that was a factor, but I feel like there was this thing where it's just like I'm just like floating in it, where I'm realizing that this is only going to get more intense. I'm gonna spend more time with my family and not my family. You know what I mean?
With your right, your own family, right?
So that being said, it's this feeling that I'm getting of like, I miss hanging out with my family, but I love my other family. And it's this weird, interesting dynamic I'm noticing. Like, and I just thought we could talk about it on the podcast in a way of like, just to poke at it and see where this takes us. Because, we have these, I know I'm not the only one in the world that has these feelings. And I know that I'm not alone.
Sure.
Where it's like, you have relationships with your family, with your brothers and your sisters. When you're younger, you're really close. When you're in your 20s, early 20s, you're even closer. And then mid 20s, you start like dating people and getting married. And then you stop really having time to hang out with your other siblings. So then when you come in, there's still this feeling of like, I'm here, but I'm not really here. I'm not always that present.
I found that when my sisters and I, when we all got married and started our own families, that we actually had more in common.
Interesting.
We actually were closer because now we were like married with children, and so we had more in common there. And it was interesting because after when we got more into our early 20s, and when my older sister married for the first time when she was 21, but my younger sister and I, we weren't married, and we were in our, like, I was in my 20s, she was in her late teens, and that's how at that point we felt very far apart because there was almost like not really anything in common. It was like I said, and then later on, go forward a few years, married our own families, and then it's like our relationship was actually better because now we were going through the same thing. I guess, like, when you're younger, you're closer because you're going through the same thing. You're living in the same household, having the same problems with your parents. Uh, Teenage years, high school, having problems with teachers, parents, whatever. And then when you get to that late teens, early 20s, when you graduate high school and, like one's working, one's still in college, one's still in high school. And that's when, we really didn't have too much in common at that point.
And that's the other thing, is that when you don't have enough in common with your siblings, you can't really have a strong relationship with them. You kind of have to let it die, or let it at least.
But then, like I said, getting married, it's like we regrouped, and now that we're all can I know our senior citizens, I'm actually getting along better with my sisters.
Can you give an example to that?
It just it's like, I remember my mother talking about this as she was getting older. She says, as you get older, you realize that all these things that upset you, all these things you got angry about, was not worth it. It's ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything. And she said she found this, like when she got more into her senior citizen years, she noticed a certain calmness that she had. She said that she was not getting as upset as easily as she used to. It's like she was able to let more things just roll off her back. And I find that is true of a lot of people when they reach their 60s. That it's like, hey, what was I so upset about? Hey, and also you develop a certain appreciation of life because as you go on, as you get older, you see so many, I hate to say it, like sad and horrible things that you just realize you develop a certain appreciation for life. And that, hey, as long as I'm healthy and I'm able to walk and I'm able to take care of myself, wow, that's, I need not look any further. You develop this appreciation for it.
Interesting.
And you realize that as you were growing up, especially in the world that we grew up in, the post-World War II way, that there was a lot of emphasis on achievement and on competition. And I think we did this in a few of the podcasts about the extreme competition that there was in high school and college. And, after you go through all that, you go, what did it matter? What, all that fighting, all that competitiveness, all that doggy, what did it matter? Did it make a better person of me? Did it make me happy?
So what regrets do you have?
That I wasn't more of a mensch, that I wasn't, especially in my teenage years, that I wasn't a nicer, more sensitive individual. Because I was just so bent on achieving, getting the best grades, singing auditions, getting award achievements. Not that you shouldn't achieve, especially I knew my parents couldn't afford college, and I knew that my grades mattered. If I wanted to go to college, I really need to get very good grades and probably get a scholarship because my parents couldn't afford any of it. Which thank God I did. But it's like, I think I could have been just basically a nicer person. I remember one time this boy I was dating, it's like he came, he and his friend came to pick me up with his friend's date. And he said, oh, by the way, that these girls called them that they needed a ride, I think, to the dance or something. And so he says, we're giving them a ride to the dance. And I was mad. It's like I wanted my then boyfriend to be all to myself in the car. I didn't want any other people in the car, but I don't know what it was. And I don't want you giving these girls a ride, And he said, "Oh, come on." And then there was another time when we were supposed to go out, and I was all dressed, makeup, everything, and he calls me up, and one of his neighbors had a sudden heart attack and had to be taken to the hospital, and they had young children, and they asked him, please, could he babysit their young kids while the wife went with her husband to the hospital. And so he had to call at the last minute to cancel the date. And I was really mad, that they couldn't find somebody else. And the young man and the boy that I was dating at the time, after I went on a rant, said to me that he says, he told me that he was very disappointed in my reaction. And I think back now, I said, yeah, he had every reason to be disappointed in my reaction. Yeah, that was nasty and selfish and immature.
Did you see maybe yourself in any of us and then tried to correct the behavior?
Oh, of course, all Jewish mothers do.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I'm saying, was there anything particular in mind, or do you have examples or stories?
I'm trying to think. Actually, you guys, I think, I think you guys had more menschlichkeit than I did, because you were raised in a Torah environment, and being raised in a Torah environment automatically gives you a guideline of morality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my morality was study, fight, kill, get ahead. I find money on the floor. Hey, it's mine. The cashier gives me too much in change. Thank you, ma'am. And I walk away, that type of thing, And with Torah, the Torah environment is, of course, Baruch Hashem, very different. That, Hashem is Aveda, being honest. The cashier gives you too much in change. You bring it to the cashier's attention. Hey, you realize you gave me too much in change here. Honesty in business dealings. These are, it'd be nice if everybody followed them, but the Torah, at least with the Torah, you've got a guideline. You have a blueprint that you can follow. Without Torah, it's like you're just wavering and waffling and just aimless. You really don't know what is truly right and what is truly wrong. I mean, I wouldn't commit murder because I don't feel like spending the rest of my life in jail. Period. Finished. But you get the idea.
Yeah.
So you kids growing up with this framework of Torah were already more menschlichkeit than I was growing up.
Interesting.
I mean, the only thing was some of the physical fights you guys got into. That was, that I really tried to intervene and tried to break those up, and the best way I could. And it just,
Well, if you were going to raise us again, like, what would you do differently?
Very good question. Definitely very good. Computer processing. I would have used behavior mod charts more often.
Okay.
And for each one of you, and been a little more like organized in that way of having actual charts written down of things that you should do, and giving, of course, stars and points and rewards like that. I did it a few times with your brothers and sisters when they were having trouble in school, to try to get them, on track. But as an actual daily exercise, no, I didn't do that. And I think I would have, been good to have to have more of a like Masuder Dick environment, if that's at all possible.
Can you explain that, please?
To have things like more in order as far as schedules, and like I said, in behavior mod charts. There was a one woman in our neighborhood with a large family. She actually had her kids sign up on time slots for personal one-to-one time. No, I'm kidding. Her kids.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they actually they knew that this amount of time on this day, this date, was their personal time with their mother.
Do you think it's very important that maybe we should have implemented when we were growing up?
I think it would have been helpful because I think some of you have told me later that you kind of felt lost in the crowd in a way.
Well, I mean, I felt that way. I felt that way during Pesach as well, where it's just like lost in the crowd. Like I'm here, but I'm not. It was it was a little unnerving to feel that way.
The irony is that a lot of people who come from very large families complain about feeling a little bit, like you said, like lost in the crowd, parents not being able to give them as much time as they would have liked. But the irony is that I've met people with only 1 or 2 kids, and their kids have the same complaint, and they only had 1 or 2 kids. Like usually in their cases, they're saying, "Mom and Dad were working all the time. I felt ignored."
I think that you're always going to feel like you're not going to have enough time. I think that's what this episode really, I think, is what I'm talking about. It's just you always think you're going to have more time until you realize you don't, and then it really hits you in the head, where it's just in the stomach, really, about how little time you have with your family, how little time you have with the people you care about and you love, and how eventually everyone just kind of goes their own way because they have responsibilities. It's not like anything personal. It's just the reality of the situation.
I was once at a graduation commencement at Boys Latin, and the valedictorian of the class said, when this ceremony is over and we receive our diplomas, we will all just very quietly walk out of each other's life.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's like kind of the main point I was trying to make, where it's just like I'm not upset about it or perturbed as much as like I would think I would be. It's just I feel this little sadness in my heart of like, yeah, that part of my life's over. It's done. I maybe it'll come back some other time, but I just don't feel like it will. But I'd like to have hope that it does.
Have you found a gray hair?
I have multiple. What are you talking about? I refuse to get these hair transplant, hair dye stuff. I'm going to age gracefully and let it be.
I was very lucky. I didn't get gray hair till I was in my mid-40s.
Oh,
mid-40s,
yeah,
late 40s.
I have gray hair, but people think I'm a lot younger than I am. So I've always gotten that. I've always gotten the idea that I look younger. But yeah, it's just that idea of just growing old, just getting older, and just seeing everything. And I think it's also, I feel like, because like I'm not going to say out loud my age, but like the age that I'm at right now is just like I'm definitely feeling like, time's a ticking. You know what I mean? And it makes me start thinking of things a little more preciously, even though I feel being pretty due diligent and being around people's lives and spending as much time as I can with them, and just realizing like you're never going to have enough time. You're never going to feel like you have enough time. You know what I mean?
Is that what you wanted to entitle this podcast? Not enough time?
That's better. Mine was growing apart, but not enough time sounds like a good. Or like enough time. Make it more positive. Enough time.
Enough time.
Enough time. That's a better.
How about enough time with a question mark after it?
Ooh, that's good. Enough time. That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, is to like really capture the time I have with you, and I can like replay it or listen to it, and of course tweak it and analyze it and do better for the podcast or for listeners. But in general, just like appreciate the moments I have with you, and I get to just capture it because today's Tati's yard site,
Ooh,
And
that right.
like
Yeah.
I spent as much
Mhm.
time as I could with him. You know, I did the best I could to spend time with him, but I regret not spending more time with him. And the reality is that like you don't know what you have until it's gone, and you don't appreciate it until it's gone. And that's just the way life goes. And like, you know, he'd always try to talk to me about some stuff or speak to me about things. And I try my best to listen. I try my best to, you know, be part of his life and have him part of mine and tell him my stories and let him, and he would listen and whatnot. But like, I still think like, oh, I wish he was here right now. I can tell him about my day and tell him about what, you know, what happened, about what
Yeah.
I'm going through on a daily basis. It's just like nothing personally against you, Ima. It's just
Yeah,
that
no,
like,
no, yeah.
it's just like, you know, you miss one parent and you have, thankfully you're lucky to have another parent, but like you miss them deeply and you want to spend time with them. It's kind of why I in a way I still go to the same shul I went to when I was a kid and sit in my dad's spot and, you know, spend time around people that know him. And by doing so, I kind of feel like I still feel him alive, so to speak. But I know that's also coming to an end. You know what
Mm.
I mean? So it's just a sad little reality. I think that's what it is with everything that's, you know, going on, especially for today being his yard site. I just something that's just been on my mind and thinking about you know, for a while.
Um, yeah, sometimes I think about the shul and I see like there've been some, there've been like quite a few some people this past year who have passed on that were part of the, I guess, old guard
Yeah.
of, set the people that were in charge of the shul in the 70s and the 80s and 90s. And um, it's quite a few of them have passed on. And it's like, that's the cycle of life that uh, all the young people now that are in your shul, young, and the younger people and the middle-aged people, they're, same is going to happen to them. They're going to get older, and then their
Hmm.
kids are going to take over. And it's, I mean, you read about this in books and you hear about it in philosophy, but when you look around and you see it's happening around you for real, it's you start to really feel like, oh my god, like, uh wow. I mean,
Yeah, that's it.
it's
That's
a
the story.
cycle of life. There was a pop song many years ago that went, "Precious and few are the moments we two can share."
Oh wow. Yeah, that's again, yeah, I'm just like I, I definitely realize, you know, just growing older, just seeing my life take all these twists and turns. And of course having regrets and having all these things, but like just I guess appreciating the story,
Mm.
you know?
The trick, I remember when I was raising you kids, especially as far as like morality goes and things like that, as teenagers, I said to you, you want to live your life, you want to live your life that you're living your life. You don't want to live your life working on damage control.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that. And I think that's really where it goes, where I'm just like definitely working on being grateful that the damage I did cause when I was younger wasn't such a big deal. Like, yeah, there are like, you know, damages and that are need for repair, but definitely a lot better because of, you know, how I was raised and how I grew up with the family that I had.
I remember, that was one of the reasons why like I said, I could have thrown you kids into full-time daycare and gone to work full-time, and boy, we needed the money. But I knew it was not going to be worth it in the long run.
Yep, I agree.
Mhm. Yeah.
I agree. Wow. Yeah. All right. We're almost out of time. Just want to tell you that I love you and have a wonderful Shabbos.
You
God
too,
willing.
honey. You too. Have a great Shabbos and a good, very good rest of the Chag.
You too. Enjoy the rest of Chag. Enjoy the Mashiach Suda. That's another episode of Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. Thanks for listening to us kvetch, reminisce, and of course, get a little motherly advice along the way. If you enjoyed this episode, Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your favorite Jewish mother or anyone who needs a little guilt in their life. Got a story, question, or just want to say hi? Send us a message. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, call your mother. She worries.